where talent is the new army and startups are the new weapons. Please give a warm welcome to the general of Hiventures, whose name even translates to soldier, the sugar daddy of the Hungarian startup ecosystem himself, Katona Bence. Make it rain.
Good evening and welcome, everybody, to the Regional Startup and Innovation Day and the Get in the Ring Startup Competition. Hiventures is extremely proud to be hosting this event for the third time. And this year is unique because we not only have 500 guests, but also 500 startups on board tonight. 3 years ago, when we set up Hiventures and started to invest in technology-based ventures, it was just a dream to create an extraordinary international startup event here in Budapest, where we can just get together and celebrate the regional startup ecosystem. As a public VC, our ambitious goal was to generate more international exposure for Hungarian startups and place Budapest on the international startup map. But we believe in the potential, the power of the whole Central Eastern European region. So let me take you back a decade ago, a little more than a decade ago, when the startup ecosystem was officially born in the Central Eastern European region. Since then, the VC investment volume has tripled, and more than 10 times startups received venture capital investments last year, according by Invest Europe. So far, 12 unicorns have been created, and with a combined value of 30 billion euros. I think that's a great number. So you never know, investors, maybe the next unicorn very well be here in the room tonight. So after the Big Bang, Hiventures joined this revolutionary phase in 2016 with a game-changing solution for early-stage startups to allow the continuous reinforcement of promising ideas and ventures. And within 3 years, we already made 250 investments. With that number, by 2018, we had become the most active early-stage investor in Europe, according to Crunchbase. Of course, this wouldn't have been possible without our VC, incubator, and mentor partners. And I think nothing proves better the success of this cooperation than the fact that Hungary became the leading destination in 2018 of venture capital investments in the Central Eastern European region. And we also launched a total unique investment program this year for small and medium-sized enterprises to fuel their growth and international expansion. Now that the year is nearly over, just think back all the hard work you have all invested into your companies and all the adventures you have had. And I want to thank you and ask to celebrate with us and invite you to celebrate with us tonight. And one more piece of good news for startups. All the region's top investor players are here in the room today, so don't be shy. Let's get in the ring. Thank you very much.
Thank you, General Sugar Daddy. I bet you've never been called that before. Actually, your wife is sitting next to you, so. Now, to sweeten things up even more, I'd like to introduce tonight's keynote speaker. He was a director at Yahoo for over 10 years and has since been a partner at the renowned VC fund and accelerator called 500 Startups. But his 500 startups have conquered well more than 300 Spartans, and he probably has 1,000 startup stories to share. So please give it up for Marvin Liao. The stage is yours.
Hey, hi everyone. Good afternoon or good evening. I'm a little bit jet lagged. I just landed last night. What an amazing, 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 amazing space. I'm wondering what I'm doing here and how I got invited to speak here with this illustrious crowd. So what I was told to talk about was to give you a perspective from Silicon Valley, views from the ground. It's actually myths of Silicon Valley. And I think that's one of the challenges right now. As we all know, there's a lot of myths that get propagated in media these days by people who actually don't live in San Francisco. And so I'm going to hopefully fix some of that views and hopefully give you a view on what it really looks like. All right. And so first of all, who I am, because I'm American and I like to talk about myself. Partner at 500 Startups. Been at 500 Startups now for the last 6 years. My firm has actually been around now 9 years. Invested in 2,300 companies worldwide. We are the world's most active seed investor. We have 12 unicorns in our portfolio, and things seem to be working well. Personally, I've invested in over 415 startups over the last 6 years in my accelerator program and through the direct venture fund. I sit on several boards. I was executive at Yahoo. I actually have been living in San Francisco now, the world's most expensive third world city, for the last 20 years now. Anyone who's been there, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And so I think I have a very unique perspective as a startup person, as a corporate executive at what was one of the top VC-funded startups that became a big, big dominant tech company for a period of time, and now it actually as an investor in the early stage. And so this is actually the context of the stuff that I'm going to talk about. So one of the myths, and this is actually something that bugs me the most about the tech media. There's a lot of things that bugs me about tech media right now. This view of this overnight success, right? Some founder goes and starts a company in a garage, and then like 1 year later on, they're a $1 billion company. Let me ask you a question. How long do you think it actually takes for a $1 billion company to exit, to go public, to be acquired? Anyone have any guess? You know, too many people, and I can't see anything. So 9 to 12 years. 9 to 12 years. It takes a long time. I also ask this question usually to the audience. There's this mythical term called product to market fit. And everyone seems to think, like, I ask my founders, I'm like, how long do you think it actually takes to get to product to market fit? And they're like, 6 months, a year. Based on my sample set, based on talking to many, many investor friends and investor sort of mentors and VCs who've been in the Valley like as long as I have been, it actually takes typically 2 to 4 years before you find product to market fit. This shit takes a long time, and it's really hard. All right? And the reality is, most startups, 80% of them die in the first 2 years. So death rate is very, very high. And it's really hard. And so I admire founders, I admire entrepreneurs who actually engage in this very, 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 very tough adventure. Other myth, and this is a big issue in this region, this idea that technology and product is everything, right? Build it and they will come. Actually, when you come with a sort of a technical or product background, that's actually what you think. Fundamentally untrue. The most important thing is actually marketing, right? Markets and distribution. How you get your product in the hands of customers. And so probably about 15, 20 years ago, this build it and they will come, have a nice high quality product, that's all you need. That might have been true. And you think back sort of 9, 10, 15 years ago, the Apple App Store didn't exist. So I use the example of the Apple App Store. When it first started, all you needed was a really good looking app that worked. And there were probably several thousand apps on the App Store. That actually makes sense. Who cares about marketing? Who cares about distribution, right? Now, fast forward, there's probably over 2 million apps in the Apple App Store. So sales and marketing actually really matters. And this is actually one of the things I think that if in this region, CE region, great technical talent, if you can actually couple that incredible technical talent with great commercial sales and marketing skills, this region is going to be unstoppable. Another myth, it's changed a lot. Silicon Valley is the center of tech. I would say 10 years ago, that was probably the case. So if you take a look at the number of unicorns, even 5 years ago, 80% of them were in the US and 20% were in China. Fast forward now, the number count of unicorns, I think it's something like 250, 300, some number. It changes all the time. It's almost like 45% US, the rest is rest of the world. And so you're seeing a huge, huge change, right? Tech is very, very distributed. And actually, I still think, I'm not saying Silicon Valley is not important and will not continue to be important. I still think it's going to be a major center and hub. But what I'm seeing in general is that you're starting to see some specialization of a lot of hubs. So for example, and look at how I'm dressed, right? Silicon Valley is amazing for B2B startups. It's amazing for SaaS startups, developer tools. It's pretty awful for what I call like fashion tech, right? London is a much better place for fashion tech, right? If you take a look at a lot of like fintech, most of the amazing fintech companies are actually coming out of London and coming out of New York. So you're seeing tech be much more distributed, seeing a lot more specialization of specific regions. And so this idea of just like, we're going to replace Silicon Valley is bullshit. You're not going to replace Silicon Valley. You have to find your niche on how to work with Silicon Valley. At least that's my view. The importance of the idea, right? You get this all the time from founders. You're like, yeah, I don't want to share what I'm working on because somebody's going to steal it, right? And this is the worst thing of like the social network, right? You know, somebody stole the idea of Facebook. It's like total garbage. Actually, what's important is execution, right? And I love Scott Adams' quote, ideas are worthless, execution is everything. It's true. Ideas are dime a dozen, right? The reality is that we look at, I'll give you an example. I just recently invested in about 10, 11 startups just in the last couple months. And I had to look through probably close to 1,000 startups to get to this number. And when you look at that many startups, you go, wow, there literally is an idea, like the same idea in almost every single country. And so actually what makes a big difference is actually the execution of it. The myth of easy VC money, right? And it's funny that we're sort of talking about sitting in a stage with sort of like a lot of other VCs. And I think, unfortunately, there's this myth, like there's this view of Silicon Valley. You're just like, you know what? There's so much money in Silicon Valley. There's so many VCs. Like, if I'm an international founder and I'm here in Hungary or the Czech Republic or wherever, and it's really hard to raise money there, I'm just going to show up in Silicon Valley and VCs are going to line up around the block and throw money at me, right? It's actually not true. If you actually look at the numbers, there is a lot more money in Silicon Valley. There's also a lot more startups in Silicon Valley. And so particularly in the early stage right now, if you look at the data, I would argue it's actually much easier with the growth of all the new VC funds now in this entire region. You see tons. It's actually easier to raise a seed round here in Europe than it is actually in the US right now. All right. Anyways, other one, big myth. And it also propagated, the one myth that I hate that's propagated in the tech media, right? It's like, oh, it's so awesome, right? Like, you know, like this company raises like $30 million. It must be an awesome company. Actually, no. Fundraising, the same company, right? End up raising $118 million, crashed and burned. What we see a lot that happens is they raise a lot of money and then they die of indigestion. Right? They have all this money, they don't know what to do with it. There's something to be said about why, no offense to big companies here, why big companies suck at innovation, right? And why they rely on startups. Big companies suck at innovation because they have lots of money, right? So they have no constraints and they don't need to focus. As an early stage startup, you have to focus very, very clearly because you don't have the budget. If you don't focus, you die. And so there's something about, there's this great saying, it's like, there's nothing like your execution in the morning to concentrate the mind. At a big company, you're like, yeah, this can wait, right? And you have to get buy-in from a bunch of people. And so innovation is actually very, very hard in large companies. And I saw this as an executive at Yahoo, too. Myth. Venture capital funding is the only way to grow an awesome business. It's fundamentally not true. Do you know 3% of all companies that get started raise VC money? So does that actually mean that 97% of all the other companies that start that actually end up becoming successful are not real businesses? I don't know, somewhere along the line we conflated this. And so the reality is that there's actually a ton of options. Bootstrapping is a great option for the record. Most startups should probably bootstrap and not raise money from VCs. All right? VCs make sense for very specific business models. VCs make sense when you want to grow fast and go big or go home. All right? The death rate also tends to be much higher for VC-funded companies because you have to grow very, very quickly versus, say, bootstrapping. And I would say there's a lot of examples now of companies that are actually super successful that didn't raise any VC money at all. So one of my favorite examples, guy named Scott, he actually started Atlassian. The two founders actually took that company public. They were mainly bootstrapped, sold some secondaries, like probably 7 or 8 years later on, sold some secondaries, but went public. This company's worth $7 billion last time I checked, and each co-founder owns 35% of the company. It's pretty awesome, right? In a typical VC-funded business, they probably would have owned maybe 3 to 4% of that. And so I do think that bootstrapping, there's a lot of options. Revenue-based, what they call revenue-based investing, right? So debt is also, like venture debt, is a valid option as well now too. It's changed a lot. My final myth, right? Team equality, right? A lot of people join startups and this is going to be a democracy. We're going to get buy-in from everybody. The reality at the early stage, startups are actually dictatorships. Hopefully enlightened dictatorships, but dictatorships. And I actually firmly believe, ultimately as the CEO and the founder, the buck stops with you. And so I learned this one great quote. It's just this term is called OTTC, right? One throat to choke. You have one person that's fully responsible. It cannot be run as a democracy. Co-CEOs do not work in startups because you have to make decisions very quickly and you have to own them. It's very, very hard when you have a committee. All right. And so last of all, my last quote. Silicon Valley is a state of mind. And what I hope you get from this is, and hope you get from all this stuff is, I hope you're excited about the time that you're in right now. This is the best time ever to be an investor in this region. This is actually the best time ever to be a startup. And anyone who tells you no, only real startups go to Silicon Valley is bullshit. You can actually build amazing companies from all over the world now. And you see the stats actually show that. So hopefully you found my presentation interesting, hopefully helpful. I wish you all the best of luck and have a wonderful evening.